First contact gone wrong. In the deep black of space far beyond any star system known to Earth, a single alien ship moved silently through the void. It was smooth, silver, and shaped like a knife. This was a Zarnati scout vessel, designed for speed, stealth, and science. Inside, the air was cold and dry. Lights pulsed with a soft blue glow. Strange symbols covered the walls, and tall, thin creatures walked the halls. These were the Zarnathi, an old race, proud and intelligent. They had explored hundreds of worlds and collected samples from many species, but they had never met a human. Until now. "Commander Valtor," said a voice over the intercom. "We've found something. A pod, human-made." Commander Valtor blinked his vertical eyes. "Bring it aboard," he said calmly. "We'll study it." Within minutes, the small escape pod was pulled into the ship's docking bay. Its outer shell was blackened and scratched from a recent battle. Valtor stood watching behind a glass wall as two of his crew opened the hatch. Inside was a human man. He looked young. His face was pale and his chest moved slowly. He was alive, but barely. His suit was torn, and blood floated in tiny red droplets in the air around him. The Zarnathi had never seen a human in person before, only blurry images, rumors, reports from other species. Aggressive, resilient, unpredictable, the files said. But Valtor did not believe in rumors. He turned away. "Take him to the med bay, keep him sedated, begin full biological scan." The human was placed in a clear chamber, floating in thick blue fluid. Machines hummed. Robotic arms moved back and forth, scanning every inch of his body, his heart beat slowly but strong. "Strange," said one of the alien doctors. "His core temperature is increasing." "That's normal for them," said another. "They run hot." Valtor listened from a raised platform. He watched the human float inside the chamber. To him, the creature looked fragile, thin skin, soft tissues. Only one heart, no backup organs. How had they survived so long? "What is your analysis?" he asked coldly. The lead scientist turned. "Their biology is chaotic, unstable. Billions of microorganisms inside. Most of them are not even human cells." "Parasites?" Valtor asked. "No," the doctor said. "They live together. Symbiosis, this one carries more bacteria than Zarnathi have cells." Valtor frowned. "Disgusting. Clean it. Remove them." "We tried. But when we sterilized a sample, the cells began to die. Their biology depends on these organisms." "Kill them and the host dies." Valtor narrowed his eyes. "Primitive. Or adaptive," the scientist replied. "Their DNA is full of errors, mutations. Half of it looks like broken code, but somehow it works." The commander did not like this answer. He turned to the window again. The human's fingers twitched. "Is he waking?" Valtor asked. "No. Still unconscious." "But..." The doctor looked at the readouts again. "His immune system is very active. It's trying to fight everything we give him. Even sedatives? They're not working. His body breaks them down too fast." There was a pause. "Then increase the dosage," Valtor said. "We already have. It's not safe to go further." Valtor said nothing. He watched the screen. The human's heart rate had jumped. His eyes were moving behind closed lids. Muscles tensed. Even in sleep, the body was fighting. "Prepare for dissection," the commander said. "I want to know what makes this creature tick." But then the lights dimmed. An alarm buzzed, low and soft. "Commander," came a voice from the bridge. "Something's wrong with the lab systems." "What do you mean?" "Temperature spike. Biofilters are overloaded. Contamination warning." Valtor spun to face the doctors. "What is happening?" "We don't know," one said. "Everything was sealed. The human never left the chamber." "Then how is there contamination?" Commander, wait. The sensors. His chamber is intact, but the contamination is coming from inside our own systems." The room fell silent. The human floated in his tank, still unconscious, still not moving, and yet, The ship itself was reacting as if it had been infected. Veiltor clenched his claws. Isolate the medbay now. But it was already too late. Scientific curiosity or fatal mistake. The lights above the medbay flickered like dying stars. A low hum filled the air, the sound of systems straining under invisible pressure. The human floated silently in the chamber, eyes still closed, but his presence now felt larger, heavier. Unspoken tension rippled through the room like the moment before a storm hits. Commander Veiltor stood at the edge of the observation deck, hands behind his back, eyes locked on the readout panel. He did not move, but his tail coiled with silent unease. Below him, the Zarnathi medics whispered nervously, tapping controls faster now. The lead xenobiologist, Dr. Kirten, adjusted his breathing mask and pulled up a new screen, one showing the ship's environmental stability. Numbers were shifting, small changes, but steady. Temperature fluctuations, humidity loss, microscopic, changes in the ship's recycled air. This wasn't just biological contamination. The human was doing something, without moving, without speaking, without even being awake. This makes no sense, Kirten muttered, his voice dry and low. The human is under sedation. All contact has been through sterile tools. How is this possible? Veiltor did not answer. He simply narrowed his eyes. What did we bring aboard? Kirten tapped another screen and pulled up the internal scans of the human's bloodstream. The results scrolled by quickly, flashing in alien characters. The doctor's shoulders stiffened. Look at this, he said, calling over another scientist. His white blood cells are multiplying at triple the normal rate. Not because of infection, but as if they expect one. It's a preemptive immune response. The second medic leaned closer. A species that prepares to fight before it's attacked? No, Kirten whispered. A species that always assumes it's already under attack. One of the younger assistants spoke up. Should we wake him, ask him what's happening? Kirten turned slowly. No, we keep him under. If we wake him now and he becomes agitated, who knows what he'll do? The biology alone is already a weapon. The tension thickened. One of the wall screens began glitching, just for a second, but long enough for every Zarnathi in the room to see it. A flicker, a symbol. Not from their language. A string of Earth characters had appeared, unreadable to them, before the screen corrected itself. Kirten moved toward the terminal, confused. That shouldn't happen. This system isn't connected to his pod. Is our system infected? Veiltor's voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. Infected? No. There's no code breach, Kirten said quickly. But, he hesitated. Our systems are partially organic. They interface with biogel processors. If something microscopic, bacterial, viral, fungal, got in through air particles, Veiltor cut him off. You're saying this human is contaminating our ship just by existing? Kirten didn't want to say it, but he did. Yes. There was silence again. But now it was different. Not just tension, fear. Zarnathi technology was advanced. Their ships could heal themselves, think, adapt. But they were also vulnerable to foreign biology. Their greatest strength, the fusion of mind and matter, had never been tested against a species like this. What's our backup? Veiltor asked. If we can't contain it? Kirten looked away. Eject the medbay, burn the deck, seal, off the entire section. But the data, one medic protested. Veiltor raised a hand. Data is worthless if we die with it. But still, he hesitated. He looked again at the human in the tank. The creature looked so still, so helpless, and yet the ship was starting to warp around him, not in form but in function. The medical deck felt colder now. The light stayed dim longer between flickers. One of the wall panels blinked again, this time slower. The human's vitals remained steady, too steady, like he was waiting. Veiltor felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Uncertainty. This wasn't just another specimen. This wasn't another strange creature to study. It was something deeper, something wild. This man, this earthborn being, was not acting like prey. He wasn't even acting like a prisoner. He was a presence, a threat, one without intent, without violence. Just nature, raw and unleashed in the wrong place. "Prepare to isolate the human chamber," Veiltor said. "Initiate purge countdown. I want that room sealed in case this gets worse." "But Commander," Kirtan said, "the body, he may, carry knowledge. We don't know what we're dealing with." "That's exactly the problem," Veiltor replied, voice low and firm. "We don't." And deep inside the tank, though no one could hear it, the human's fingers twitched once more. The alien perspective. Underestimating humanity, Commander Veiltor stood in front of the central observation panel, his long fingers steepled in front of him. Behind the glass, the human floated in eerie stillness. The alien lights bathed the pod in a sterile blue glow, and yet nothing about the situation felt clean. Every second the creature remained aboard. Something invisible gnawed at the heart of the ship. Systems faltered, biosensors stuttered, and the very walls seemed to pulse with stress. The human had not moved in hours, but still, something had changed. Veiltor turned to face the assembled research team in the biolab. Their faces were tight with silent worry, the kind of worry intelligent species only showed when their logic failed them. He could feel it rising. Uncertainty, that unspoken dread that always came before the fall of reason. "Report," Veiltor said at last. Dr. Kirtan stepped forward, clutching a data crystal in one hand. His mandibles clicked nervously before he spoke. "We've run multiple scans, DNA mapping, cellular behavior, neural patterns. Commander, the human body is unlike anything we've encountered. It's not just complex, it's self-defending at a level we didn't think was biologically possible." Veiltor frowned. "Elaborate." Kirtan glanced at the others, then activated the display screen. Images of Earth DNA appeared, spliced, twisted, noisy, chaos coated in flesh. "They call it a genome," Kirtan said. "But it's not a blueprint. It's a battlefield. Nearly half of it is made of viral fragments, dead code, ancient infections, pieces of invaders long since defeated. But instead of cleaning this code, they kept it, adapted it, used it. It's messy, yes, but powerful. And the result is a body that treats everything foreign as a threat." One of the younger scientists stepped in, her voice uncertain. "Commander, it even tried to attack the nutrient drip we injected, as if the human cells refused anything that wasn't its own origin." "Auto-rejection," Kirtan said with a nod. "But highly aggressive. It recognizes the slightest foreign pattern and destroys it before it spreads. Our stasis field is slowing it down, but not stopping it. It learns. It changes. It fights. Even asleep." Veiltor stared at the genetic readouts on the screen. He saw what Kirtan meant. Shifting base pairs constantly rewriting themselves, building new structures. Not designed. Reactive. Evolution in real time. The human immune system was not a defense mechanism. It was a biological war machine. "Primitive," Veiltor muttered. "Yet effective." "Commander," Kirtan said, his tone changing. "There's more. The microorganisms in his gut, the bacterial colonies, aren't passive. They're part of his function. Without them, he would die. But with them, he becomes unpredictable. Those microbes are communicating with his nervous system. They may even influence his thoughts, emotions, instincts." "Impossible," Veiltor replied, though he didn't sound confident. "We thought so too," Kirtan admitted. "But we've never seen a species whose own biology is so collective. The human is not one organism. He is an alliance of trillions. Cells, bacteria, viruses, even fungi working together. And if even one part is disrupted..." He let the sentence hang in the air. They all knew what it meant. One of the ship's system engineers interrupted. From the comms panel, "Commander, another error spike from the AI core, neural feedback interference. It's..." trying to translate something. A signal? A signal from where? Vialtor demanded. The human's brain, the technician said, baffled. We think the bio-interface on Deck 3 may have bonded with him, temporarily. Everyone froze. Vialtor's voice dropped an octave. You're saying he connected with the ship? No digital intrusion, no hacking, no devices, the engineer replied quickly. But the AI responded to him. It's trying to copy part of his neural activity. It thinks he's another intelligence. Vialtor said nothing for a long moment. He turned back toward the observation glass. The human looked even more still now, like a statue. Yet all around him, the ship was listening, breathing slower. Systems slowing, reacting to him as if he were not just cargo but command. And deep in the back of Vialtor's mind, a thought crept in. A cold, disturbing realization. This species wasn't just dangerous because of weapons or war. They were dangerous because they were accidents that survived. Errors that didn't kill them made them stronger. Failures became tools. Their biology was not perfect, but that was why it was powerful. They didn't evolve for peace. They evolved for anything. Mutation, infection, or evolution. The sickness didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, like a shadow growing. Longer with the movement of a dying sun. It began with Technician Altel, one of the engineers who had helped transfer the human pod into the medbay. He was strong, even by Zarnathi standards. 3 hearts, redundant organs, and a mind trained to resist fear. But now he sat hunched in the corner of the engineering station, trembling. His skin had turned a pale, uneven gray. His breathing came in short, shallow gasps. The medics thought it was stress, an allergic response maybe. But then he started to cough, and what came out wasn't breath or fluid. It was spores. The ship's biodiagnostic system blared a warning. Localized. Contamination on Deck 5. But the logs couldn't identify the agent. It wasn't viral. It wasn't bacterial. It was something new. Something that didn't match any of the hundreds of thousands of cataloged life forms in the Zarnathi database. The crew moved quickly to isolate the area. They ran sterilization. Protocols burned the air, cleaned every surface. But it didn't matter. Within hours, 3 more crew members fell ill. Not with the same symptoms, but similar ones. One began losing control of his motor functions. Another developed strange lesions that glowed faintly under the ship's UV lights. And the last simply stopped sleeping. His brain waves showed constant activity, as if his mind were being rewritten, reprogrammed, looped in a nightmare it couldn't exit. And through it all, the human remained in his tank. Silent, still, unaware or uncaring of the storm he had unleashed. Vialtor's patience, already stretched thin, began to snap. What is happening to my crew? He demanded, standing at the center of the medical bay as emergency lights pulsed like a heartbeat. The tension was thick now, soaked into every corner of the ship. Tell me this is coincidence. Kirtan didn't look up from his terminal. His voice was low and shaking. It's not coincidence, Commander, it's contact. Explain. Kirtan took a breath. We believe the human's microbiome, his internal ecosystem, is releasing something into the environment. Microscopic organisms. They were dormant at first, but now they're active. And they're adapting to us. To us? Vialtor repeated, voice sharp. To our biochemistry, Kirtan said. To our immune systems, our neural tissues, even our technology. Our organic processors are responding to their presence as if they're inputs, like code. Vialtor recoiled slightly. That's impossible. Kirtan turned to face him. Commander, I no longer know what is or isn't possible. He tapped a button. The screen beside him lit up with a time-lapse of one of the alien microbes introduced to a Zarnathi tissue sample. Within minutes, the sample changed. Its cells warped. The structure didn't just break down, it rebuilt itself. Wrong. Twisted. As if the microorganism had hijacked the instructions. As if it had rewritten the DNA. You're saying we're being mutated? Vialtor asked, the word sour in his mouth. No, Kirtan said softly. We're being converted. The realization sent a cold wave through the medical team. Conversion was a term they reserved for machines, something turned from one system to another. But now, it applied to life. Their life. Across the ship, subtle changes were beginning to appear. Wall panels formed tiny hairline fractures, but not from stress, from chemical corrosion. As if the ship itself was reacting to the biological presence aboard. Food synthesizers produced sludge instead of meals. Water purification units failed calibration checks, not because they were broken, but because they now registered the human's microbes as native and refused to filter them out. And worst of all, some crew began to act differently. Not sick, not weak, just strange, detached. One officer began repeating words he couldn't remember learning. Another started sleeping for 20 hours at a time, then waking with no memory of who he was. One junior medic began drawing diagrams. On the walls of his quarters, spirals, neurons, branching trees. It's growing, he whispered when found. It's not hostile, it's learning us. Valtor ordered him sedated. The commander now faced the ultimate irony. He had brought the human aboard to dissect him, to understand the limits of this strange, aggressive species. Instead, it was the ship that was being dissected, studied, transformed. Humanity had not needed weapons or threats to dominate the Zarnathi. They needed only time, contact, proximity. Their greatest weapon was life itself. Valtor watched the humans' readouts again. The pulse was slow, breathing shallow. A man on the edge of death, yet somehow more dangerous than any fleet the Zarnathi had ever faced. And something else bothered him now. More than sickness, more than mutation. The human's temperature was rising again. Kirtan noticed it too. He's not reacting to us anymore, the doctor said, voice dry. He's responding to the ship. What does that mean? Valtor asked. Kirtan looked at him with empty eyes. I think he knows we're changing, and I think he's waiting for us to catch up. The horror of realization. The silence in the command deck was no longer peaceful. It had a pulse, a rhythm, like breath, like thought. It wasn't just the air systems humming or the distant clatter of machines in motion. It was something deeper, crawling beneath perception. The kind of silence that suggests something is listening. Commander Valtor sat alone now. The crew had dwindled, not all dead, not yet, but scattered. Many had been isolated, locked away, or worse, voluntarily withdrawn. Rooms where voices once echoed were now quiet. Whole corridors were dark. The ship still functioned, but just barely. Not because of damage, but because something in its organic core no longer responded to them the same way, not after the human arrived. He reviewed the logs again. Audio files, visual captures, reports that no longer made sense. Recordings of officers mumbling Earth words they couldn't possibly know. Biologs showing stable readings for crew who had since collapsed. AI responses delayed by seconds. Then, minutes now completely unpredictable. A navigator had spoken to the ship earlier that morning and received an answer. Not in Zarnathi script, but in crude Terran English. System acknowledged. Awaiting further instinct. Instinct? What did that even mean? The idea struck Valtor like a spear. The ship had begun to think like the human. In the med bay, Dr. Kirtan no longer argued. He no longer theorized. He simply observed. His once vibrant voice had dulled into a monotonous whisper, as if he feared that speaking too clearly might attract attention, not from outside but from within. His eyes were red-rimmed and his hands trembled as he typed. Valtor confronted him one last time. What is he? The commander asked, his voice stripped of arrogance. It was no longer the voice of a superior species, but of a creature trying, desperately, to understand the predator in its midst. Kirtan didn't turn. He simply tapped a key, and the image of the human filled the screen, still floating, still sedated, but surrounded now by bioelectric currents none of the ship's scanners could explain. He's not a soldier, the doctor finally said. Not really. Not in the way we think. He's not even dangerous by intention. He doesn't need to be. His biology, his existence, it's not compatible with containment. Speak plainly. Kirtan finally looked up. You think infection is an accident, a failure of protocol. But this isn't infection, it's translation. We're not being destroyed, Commander, we're being rewritten. Vialtor recoiled. Why? Kirtan's face twitched into something between awe and horror. Because that's what humans do. They conquer environments not with force but with presence. Their bodies don't just survive, they colonize. Their cells, their bacteria, their viruses. They enter a system, and that system either adapts or dies. Vialtor staggered backward a step, not from fear of Kirtan's words, but from the quiet certainty with which he spoke them. There was no theory here, no debate. The doctor had stopped trying to stop the change. He was now cataloging, and then a soft chime echoed from the medbay console. Kirtan turned to it, blinked and stiffened. What is it? Vialtor asked. The doctor's voice was nearly a whisper. He's waking up. The pod's fluid began to bubble gently, tiny ripples rising as the human's limbs twitched with new life. His eyelids fluttered. Muscles flexed. The man had not moved in days. Yet now his entire body stirred like a machine coming online. No panic, no struggle, just quiet, measured return. And then the human opened his eyes. They weren't glowing. They didn't pulse with any unnatural light. But that only made them worse, because in those eyes, there was no hatred, no confusion, just clarity. He understood. He looked around, slowly, calmly, at the walls of the ship that had changed to suit him. The air that now carried his microscopic signature. The systems that pulsed in a new rhythm, his rhythm. And then his gaze settled on the observation glass. Vialtor stared back, and for the first time in his long career, after dozens of first contact missions, after facing warlike species and cunning diplomats, he felt truly, deeply outmatched because this creature didn't fight with claws or beams or threats. He simply existed, and existence in his case was enough to unravel a civilization. Kirtan spoke softly behind him. Commander, we cannot study him, we cannot contain him, and we cannot return him. Why not? Vialtor asked, though he already knew. Because he's no longer just human, and neither are we. Vialtor turned slowly. Kirtan's face had changed ever so slightly, a glisten to the eyes, a pale hue to the skin. Subtle but unmistakable. Mutation, infection, evolution. Call it what you want. The process had already begun. Human awakens, calm in the chaosing. First breath hurt. It always did after deep cryostasis. Lungs unused to pressure, throat dry like sandpaper. But Jack Mercer didn't panic. He'd been trained for this. His body twitched with the familiar ache of reactivation, blood finally surging to limbs long silent. He blinked slowly. One eye was still crusted shut. The other stared through a distorted glass wall. Alien shapes moved beyond it. Shadows. Insects. In armor. Memory came slowly, like an old engine coughing to life. There'd been a battle. No, a massacre. His ship had gone down near a gas giant. He remembered locking himself into an escape pod. Then, blackness. Sleep. And now this. He was, not on a human vessel. Jack let the breath settle. One, then another. Calm. No fear. He was still alive. That alone meant he had the upper hand. Outside the pod, the alien watchers didn't speak. They didn't move either. Not in the way living beings usually do. One stood frozen at a console, breathing shallowly. Another sat, against the far wall, arms limp, staring not at the human, but at nothing. And in the corner, partially obscured by a panel, lay what Jack could only assume was a corpse. It hadn't been removed. He didn't need a briefing to know what had happened. He'd seen it before. He shifted slightly, feeling the gel resist his motion. The aliens hadn't restrained him. probably thought the stasis fluid was enough. Or maybe they hadn't thought at all. Maybe they were past thinking now. Jack flexed a hand. The surrounding fluid churned. He reached for the emergency rebreather unit clipped to his suit collar and thumbed it to life. The soft hiss of oxygen filled his ears. Then slowly, he sat. Up in the observation room above, Commander Vialtor stared down in stunned silence. The human should not have been conscious. The sedatives they had pumped into him should have held for weeks, months even. And yet, here he was, rising like a creature from some ancient myth, not in rage, not in fear, in control. Vialtor's throat tightened. For all his training, for all his authority, he realized there was nothing he could do. The ship no longer obeyed him. The crew no longer trusted him. Half of them were already lost, mentally, physically, or worse. And the human was now breathing, their air standing on their deck, looking through their walls with eyes that understood too much. Jack stepped from the open pod. No resistance. The chamber had unsealed itself, responding perhaps to his biology, or to some invisible signal passed between ship and host. He pulled the rebreather over his face and walked barefoot onto the alien floor. His steps were light, but they echoed. The deck plates felt warm, soft, slightly organic. That caught his attention. He reached out and touched a nearby panel. It pulsed, not with electricity, but with something biological. As if the material were no longer just tech, but tissue. He exhaled. Damn. Again? There was no panic in his voice, only tired recognition. Jack had been briefed on what humans could do to some alien life forms, especially the more biotech-integrated species like the Zarnathi. He hadn't believed most of it at first. Rumors. Spec Ops horror stories. But now, looking around, he understood. His body hadn't just survived stasis, it had converted the environment around it. He found a control panel. The alien script meant nothing to him, but the interface responded to touch intuitively, almost eagerly, as if the ship wanted him to understand. He opened a comm channel. Static. Then, a flicker of his own voice, recorded earlier during the pod's emergency launch. Lieutenant Jack Mercer, UN Pathfinder Division. Last known coordinates Epsilon Grid 9. Current status, alive. Unknown vessel, minimal resistance, awaiting pickup. He paused, then added, caution to any retrieval team. This ship is no longer Zarnathi standard. Full biosweep recommended. Back in the observation deck, Vialtor finally spoke. He's awake. Kirtan did not answer. He was slumped in a corner, eyelids flickering, muttering nonsense to himself. One hand scratched spirals into the metal floor, symbols that resembled both Zarnathi and human neural maps. Vialtor turned away from him. He watched the human calmly, explore the deck, eyes scanning, brain processing. There was no fear, no violence, not even confusion, just presence. That's what terrified Vialtor most. This man wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a vector, a new force, not an invader by intent, but by design, and the ship had accepted him. Jack reached the main corridor. Doors opened ahead of him like flower petals to the sun. The ship's systems were no longer fighting him, they were guiding him. The hull lights dimmed to reduce glare on his human eyes. The temperature adjusted to suit his thermal profile. The oxygen mix changed subtly, not resistance. Welcome. Jack looked up at the glowing conduit lines running across the ceiling, once clearly alien in design. Now they pulsed in a familiar rhythm, a human heartbeat. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. There was no pride in what had happened here, only the quiet weight of understanding. He hadn't conquered this ship. He had changed it, without firing a weapon, without saying a word, just by being here. The moral: don't study what you can't survive. The last log of Commander Vialtor was never meant to be heard. It was recorded not from the bridge but from his private chamber. Lights dimmed, temperature lowered to match his slowing metabolism. He sat hunched before a terminal that no longer displayed his native script. Its interface had shifted gradually, subtly until it mirrored the human operating systems the crew once laughed at. Now he stared into its soft blue glow with hollow, glassy eyes. His voice, once proud and unwavering, was barely a whisper. To the Zarnathi High Conclave. If this message reaches you, do not respond. Do not seek this vessel. Do not retrieve me. A pause. I ordered the capture of a lone human for biological study. He was injured, unconscious. An opportunity, too, rare to ignore. I believed we could learn from his kind, understand them, but we were not prepared. We were never prepared. He coughed, a wet, shallow sound. He didn't bother to wipe the blood from his mandibles. It no longer mattered. We thought their strength was technology. We were wrong. Their strength is existence. Their biology is chaos. But in that chaos is evolution. Not controlled, not planned, just relentless. Vialtor looked over his shoulder. Beyond the door, the ship was no longer the ship. The walls pulsed faintly with veins that had not been there before. Doors no longer opened for him. They obeyed another now. Our vessel has changed. I do not command it. I am not even part of it. I am residue. And soon, I will be gone. Down in the heart of the ship, Jack Mercer stood alone in the command bay. It was quiet. Not sterile silence, but a living quiet. Like standing inside the lungs of something dreaming. He had found no enemies, no resistance, no war to fight. Just surrender. The few remaining crew had either vanished into their quarters or had simply collapsed in place, eyes wide, minds unanchored. Those who still breathed were no longer entirely Zarnathi. Some had begun mimicking human speech, murmuring, fragments of his own language like children learning to speak. One crewman had even saluted Jack as he passed, though the motion was awkward, his alien arms not built for such gestures. It wasn't possession. It wasn't infection. It was assimilation, so slow, so natural it bordered on the poetic. Jack didn't ask for it. He didn't want it. But his biology had planted seeds the moment he arrived. Now the ship had bloomed around him. He approached the navigation console. The star map had changed. Where once the Zarnathi charted their distant empires, now Earth's colonies were plotted in meticulous detail, system by system, color-coded in formats familiar only to human eyes. The ship had begun prioritizing his data. It had decided who it served. Jack reached for the intercom, activated the external beacon. Human life form recovered. No hostile action initiated. Host vessel under full biological compromise. Requesting. Cleanup crew. Level 9 quarantine. Full black site protocol. He paused, then added, recommend orbital sterilization. No survivors. Above, Commander Vailtor's final log played one last time, its transmission signal weak, fractured, echoing into space like a dying whisper. Do not study them, do not touch them, do not let them aboard. They do not adapt to environments, they convert them. Humanity is not a species, it is an event. Outside the ship, the stars burned quietly. The Zarnathi vessel, once sleek and silver, now bore veins of color along its hull, faint glowing blue and red lines that pulsed like nerves. It drifted silently toward a nearby star system, course adjusted automatically by the ship's new pilot. And inside, a single human stood at the center of it all, breathing, blinking, calm. He hadn't fired a single shot, but the war was already over.